Well, hello everyone. Today we are continuing our Black History Month series. We are super excited to have our special guest here with the Vancouver Island Human Rights Coalition. A huge thing that we want to do is to make sure we start things in a right way. To begin, we are situated on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Lekwungen and Wasanich-speaking people's territory. It's important whenever we talk about Black lives, Black experiences, to situate ourselves and locate where we are when we're having these conversations within the context of human rights and things of that sort. So without further ado, I just want to welcome our special guest. Tell me a bit about yourself, your name, and a bit about you.
Well, my name is Ireh Iyioha, and I am a professor at the Faculty of Law at the University of Victoria. And I'm a writer of fiction as well. My fiction has been published in a number of outlets, including in anthologies and journals. My life's work is very much about social justice advocacy through service, creative writing, teaching, and research. And my work is deeply inspired by a commitment to the needs of marginalized groups in Canada who face racism and discrimination in all areas of public engagement, including in healthcare and educational institutions.
Wow, that's amazing. I think what's so beautiful about, especially the work that you're doing, is directly involved with, we talk about human rights. And when we talk about Black History Month, what does that mean to you? What does that represent for you?
Black History Month. I'm going to speak to what it represents for me shortly, but let me start by acknowledging that I have mixed feelings here. And this has to do with the level of attention that is sometimes, shall I say, superficially placed on the Black experience for 1 month. Mm-hmm. Once the month is over, everyone seems to move on to something else. The way I see Black History Month is that it is a period, we've carved out in a year to encourage learning about Black people, about their cultures, their history, and about how we got here to this time and place where we seem to, to be in a constant fight for our lives. It is a time, I think, to learn about those who paved the way for us, to learn about how we move forward for a better future. It is a time for a deeper, more critical reflection on why change for Black people seems slow. I think it's important for us to work on improving the Black experience every day of the year, mm-hmm. for conversations to continue to happen, conversations that shed light on why Black success and advancement are mm-hmm. not given the recognition they deserve. These are conversations that must be had year round, but I do value Black History Month to the extent that it intensifies this conversation in this 1 month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you bring up a very strong point, is that Black lives and its history should be, highlighted and amplified all the time. It shouldn't just be ascribed to certain months. I completely echo those sentiments, because it's important to continue conversations beyond the month of February, for sure. Specific to your experience, is there any specific figures from history or in your life that's inspired you?
Yes, there are. Thank you for that question. I have people in my personal life who have always been a great source of inspiration. My mother and my father, for example. My mother always said, you can be whatever you choose to be. And she pushed me to aspire to great heights. My father provided the right resources to succeed. He empowered me to speak up when I see something wrong. Both parents empowered me to fight for social justice in the little ways and in the big ways I can, given my position as a professor in the Faculty of Law. They taught me to believe in something and work hard for it, that success comes to those who care enough to work hard to mm-hmm. attain it. But there are also, history-making Black figures whose life work have greatly inspired me. Martin Luther King and the power of his vision for a new world in which Blacks can realize their true potential. Barack Obama's brand of aspiration and his proof of what's possible when you believe is simply mind-bending. And very importantly, the courage and sheer tenacity of the Honorable John Lewis, who told us that we should not get lost in a sea of despair, who told us not to get bitter or hostile. We should be hopeful. We should be optimistic, that we should never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, what he called necessary trouble, you know, that we will find a way to make a way out of no way. Those are some very inspiring words.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. All those people, I personally was definitely enlightened my journey in also, you know, things of social justice. I'm currently also a student at the University of Victoria studying political science, minor in social justice, and just seeing the, you know, how we as young Black people have also benefited from the fruits of their labor, in the sense that a lot of the things that you talk about, that necessary um, the necessary hardships that these people go through in order to make a better future. And with the theme of our series, "The Future Is Now," this is pretty hand in hand.
And I would say we wouldn't be here without the sacrifice that they made, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not, you know, they're not distant. They're not Americans who fought for America. Mm-hmm. They fought for the rest of us Black peoples from everywhere else who have mm-hmm. found our way here.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree, and that's that beyond borders thing. Is that it continues on, and to kind of bring it towards kind of your experiences. If you could go back in time, if you look at the young you, what would your advice be to your teenage self?
That is an interesting question. Thank you. I think I'll tell my teenage self to be careful about trusting that everyone sees you the same way you see yourself. That is, as an ordinary girl, you know, who has blood running in her veins. My adult self knows that we are not seen as we feel. That imposing us tropes, stereotypes that attempt to remove us from our basic humanity, mm-hmm. tropes that make monsters and caricatures of us, and that falsely represent us as overly angry, violent, capable of all forms of vices, and not deserving of kindness. You know the tropes, right? The Black woman is said to be angry and capable of scaring and harassing others. The Black man is said to be angry and capable of violence. The Indigenous woman has sexualized tropes hard at heart every turn. The Indigenous man is assumed to be inherently capable of a whole range of vices. And because of these stereotypes, we supposedly don't deserve the concessions and allowances that Caucasians have in every area of their lives, in employment, in healthcare, in sentencing, to name a few. I will tell my teenage self never to make assumptions about what others think of her and how they see her, but rather to go about life learning to understand that the world is complicated, not easily understood, and can be unkind. That the reflection she sees in the mirror, that of an ordinary little girl in the day, ready to take on the world's challenges, ready to excel, ready to prove to her parents that their belief in her was not misplaced. That reflection is actually fractured when viewed through the eyes of white others. That kind of knowledge would have better prepared me for when I came to Canada and realized for the first time that I was seen as Black rather than as human. Mm-hmm. And why is that relevant? Because being seen as Black comes with consequences. The little girl from the past would have been less shocked then and less surprised even today when she sees the true manifestation of racism and the accompanying hubris of those who think we do not see it.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's you raise so many strong points about you know, the impacts of the white gaze and the burdens that comes alongside that, of not being able to ascribe your own meaning, but that meaning being placed on you. So things like stereotypes and the different supposed assumptions placed on us. um, yeah, it's so true, and we see that within, you know, the different institutions which you mentioned, like as you're saying about like healthcare and things of that sort. That's um, something that the more and more, even as a Black person, you know, if I would have known, you know, the different stereotypes, um, I wonder if it would have changed the way that I would have reacted, but maybe would have allowed for me to lead with more care, to lead with prioritizing my self-care, you know. So I completely, I see that as very strong, like really good advice.
Thank you. Thank you. It prepares you, right? It prepares you as a buffer to prevent you from the shock that comes when you recognize that your view of the word and how the word sees you is very different from how, you know, how you think the word sees you is very different from how they actually see you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
No one is supposed to wake up every day thinking, I'm Black, and because I'm Black, I have to do things in a certain way.
Yeah.
I have to speak in a certain way. I have to be careful in my choice of words such that it doesn't lead me to be cast in a certain light, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think when we talk about, you know, things like human rights, which obviously you're very well versed in, um, my question to you is, what does human rights mean to you?
Human rights. I write about it. My top 40 on the 40 award was given for commitment to human rights in every aspect of my academic and philanthropic work, right? But it is also increasingly becoming a taxing phrase. What does it mean? What should it mean? You know, should it mean anything to anyone when the structures for guaranteeing that everyone respects it are non-existent in practice and only seem to exist in theory? You know, when I say non-existent in practice, I do not mean to say they are not there. You know, you have human rights commissions, for example. I mean to say they are not effective. And that is the focal point of my academic research, right? What makes law effective? What institutions of law are effective or not effective? And what is the reason behind that, right? So you see, Black people are killed on the streets, harassed by law enforcement on the streets, harassed by co-workers in workspaces and denied employment. Blacks have to work 10 times harder than their white counterparts to gain the same or less recognition. Blacks often, you know, are often relegated to a category in employment, you know, that resists the definition of equality. You see that especially in academic institutions, right? And so they are relegated to a category in employment that resists a definition of equality. For example, racialized categories are often created in academic hiring, where Blacks and racialized applicants are supposed to compete for a single diversity opening. Tokenism at best, right? And in that single act of affirmative action that many human rights advocates often gleefully applaud as a step forward, you know, we find not just the tokenism I've just talked about, but a reiteration of an unspoken assumption that Blacks are supposedly not qualified enough to compete with white applicants in the same pool. You know, that we have been forced through a benevolent opening into a system that we otherwise don't belong within. You see, this unfortunate rhetoric and the whitewashing of Black achievements is a practice that even our human rights commissions have not only allowed to persist, but have actually actively espoused and sustained through increasingly weak and decontextualized rulings. I don't know that there are many Black people, at least those I know in my circle, who still believe that human rights are truly fundamental rights and freedoms, and that everyone is endowed with based on common values of dignity, equality, and respect, at least not in the sense of the practical implications of that recognition. You see, my current research and life experiences tell me that there is so much that needs to be done. So much that needs to be done to compel obedience to human rights law.
Mm-hmm.
Obedience based on acceptance of the ideal that resembles what human rights is supposed to mean. There has to be a way to get there, and we're not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sit in that uncomfortable space where my work is about human rights, my writing and research are largely about it, but I have seen way too much of what's wrong, even with a system that was designed to take care of, racialized folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, again, once again, I love speaking to you. It's great.
Thank you.
There's just, I completely agree in terms of, when we define human rights, even in our understandings is who only a couple, decades and centuries ago, only certain people were considered human. And in terms of even participating in various structures, whether it be political structures or even participating and being seen and heard, certain lives have not even been counted as being humans. And so when we see the lingering effects of that historically and then showing it in present day, sometimes when you even see about the ways in which certain bodies are treated, certain bodies are amplified and valorized as opposed to others, that's a testament of kind of where we've been and where we're moving to change that. And it's important to see it, see the historical implications, but also seeing how we continue to perpetuate these things, the ways that we move and move in society. If we aren't cognizant of the ways that we impact one another, we continue and have the potential to continue to create more and more harm. Yeah, completely agree with that. With the theme being the future is now. So when we're discussing issues around race, what conversations and actions are missing or need to be done to contribute to that better future?
Thank you for that question. This week at UVic Law, I had the honor of listening to a powerful presentation by the Honorable David St. Pierre, a judge of the Provincial Court of British Columbia, who spoke on why it is difficult to speak about racism. And this question you've asked me was implicit in one part of the compound question I asked him at the end of his presentation. I had asked, how do we have these difficult conversations about race, especially with people whom we feel have discriminated against us in their actions? Now, your question is, what types of conversations should we be having? And what actions are missing, that we need to create a better future for our kids? Well, if we want to create a better future, I believe we should address the lack of representation of Blacks in positions of power and in decision-making platforms. I think this is critical. It's not the only way, but it is one of the key ways to create a better future for Black people. Who is at the table when you file your job application application for admission, or in any other process? Who is at the table when your file is pulled up? Who is in the room to speak for you? Who sees your humanity? Who sees your life story? Who sees the path you've been on? If we are left out of the rooms where decisions are being made, we will continue to struggle to attain equal status. We will continue to struggle to have access to the social goods that other members of society have. In the area of justice, for example, for the abject discrimination we face in our daily lives, we should be asking why our courts and our human rights commissions and tribunals are still almost entirely led by Caucasians who do not have the necessary experiential skills to understand most of the human rights questions that come before them. If you do not understand the context of a Black person's life, for example, if you do not understand that certain words have histories and are not innocent, that certain expressions emerge from a place of bias, that certain actions are not isolated and must be read within a broader context of events and a broader historical context. How do you pretend to understand the case over which you adjudicate, right? So why our systems of justice, some of the whitest spaces in the country, supposedly as diverse as ours? All right. Why do we pretend that bias is more often than not unconscious? And I like to think that this is the dominant view in some quarters, even when both the experiential evidence and outcomes of judicial and institutional processes tell a story that is clearly one of conscious bias. If your interpretation of the facts of a matter is filtered through your Caucasian experience of privilege, if that filtration leads you to take sides on matters of facts without knowledge of the true realities that racialized peoples face daily, how can you sit on a seat of power and rule over the people you don't understand? Mm-hmm. So the thing is about representation. With regards to political leadership in the era of Trump, Professor Cornel West says, you can't lead the people if you don't love the people. I would say, if you don't know the people, you can't lead the people. If you don't know the people, you can't judge and adjudicate on cases about the people. At least you shouldn't, not without the benefit of their insight. Representation is key.
Yes, I think you said it, you nailed it, is that representation is definitely key. I think while we continue to speak about representation and making sure that racialized peoples are in these spaces, is to make sure that while the representation is there, that the structures within itself allow for that representation to happen. So for us to have the Barack Obamas, for us to have the Michelle Obamas and Kamala Harris and, all the people that we name, even yourself, right? We need to make sure that, the structures are in play so that we can have more of that. Yes, the representation is key, but the structure and the foundations in which enables for that to happen must also shift. Those mindsets must also shift.
Absolutely, and I agree wholly. I agree entirely with that.
So that comes to the conclusion of our discussion here today. I'm so thankful for the conversation. I'm really happy with all the points that were mentioned, and for everybody listening today, is really listen to the strong words that was mentioned here and all the things that were said. It's important when we highlight Black lives, Black experiences, and within this month that we continue on these conversations to move past the month of February, but in our day-to-day beyond that. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.